We're fucked. We're absolutely fucked. Captain Marcus Kane's voice crackled through the static-filled radio as machine gun fire shredded the jungle canopy above Delta Squad's heads. The special operations team was pinned down in a ravine, surrounded by drug runners who knew every tree, every shadow in these godforsaken mountains. Kane slammed his fist against a moss-covered boulder. Where the hell is our support? 800 meters away in the command center, a quiet supply clerk named Sarah Chen sat frozen at her workstation, watching the chaos unfold on the tactical screen. Other operators frantically tried to reach air support, but the weather had grounded everything that could fly. Before continuing this story, please comment below with your city or country where you're watching us from. Your feedback inspires us to do better. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the locked drawer beneath her desk. The drawer she had sworn never to open again. "Sir," the radio operator's voice was hollow. "No one's available. The storm has everything grounded for at least 2 hours." Kane's bitter laugh cut through the static. 2 hours? We'll be dead in 20 minutes. But in that moment, Sarah's fingers found the cold metal of something that officially didn't exist. Her breathing slowed. The trembling stopped. In 15 minutes, everything would change. The frightened clerk everyone ignored was about to remind the world why some legends never truly die. Forward operating base. Eagle's Nest Command Center hummed with controlled panic. 6 operators worked their stations, calling for any available assets within a 100-mile radius. Nothing. The storm system had rolled in fast, grounding helicopters and making drone coverage impossible. On the main screen, blue dots representing Delta Squad clustered in a narrow canyon while red markers multiplied around them like a virus. Sarah Chen had worked supply logistics at Eagle's Nest for 8 months. Every morning she arrived at 0530, made coffee for the operations staff, and spent 12 hours managing requisition orders and inventory databases. The operators called her Mouse, partly for her quiet demeanor, partly for how she seemed to shrink into corners when combat personnel walked by. At 28, she was unremarkable in all the ways that mattered in a war zone. Brown hair pulled back in regulation bun, standard fatigues that hung loosely on her small frame, and eyes that never met anyone's gaze. Tonight was different. As the radio chatter grew more desperate, Sarah's fingers moved to the locked drawer she'd installed herself on her first day. The other operators didn't notice. They were too focused on their screens, on the impossible math of 30 cartel fighters versus 6 special operators with limited ammunition and no air support. "Delta 7, this is Eagle's Nest," the senior operator tried again. "We're working on options. Can you hold position?" "Negative," Kane's strained voice came back. "We're taking fire from 3 sides. RPGs incoming." An explosion thundered through the speakers, followed by screams and fresh automatic weapons fire. Sarah's hand froze on the drawer handle. 3 years. 3 years she'd kept her promise to disappear, to become nobody, to let the world believe that particular ghost had been buried. But promises meant nothing when good people were about to die. She pulled the drawer open. Inside lay a rifle case, unlike anything in the standard armory. Black polymer with biometric locks, no identifying marks except a small engraving that looked like a coiled serpent. Beneath it, folded with military precision, lay a ghillie suit that had been modified in ways not taught in any manual. The fabric wasn't just camouflage, it was artistry, crafted by someone who understood that in the jungle, the difference between invisibility and death was measured in millimeters. Colonel Harrison walked into the command center just as Sarah lifted the case onto her desk. He was a tall man, hardened by 30 years of service, with eyes that had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Except this. He stopped mid-stride, coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. Their eyes met across the room. In that look were 3 years of shared secrets, careful manipulations, fiction maintained for reasons that went beyond what either of them could safely touch. Harrison's expression cycled through surprise, concern, and finally grim acceptance. He nodded almost imperceptibly. "I'll handle the questions," he said quietly. "You handle the problem." Sarah was already moving. She slung the rifle case over her shoulder and grabbed the ghillie suit, heading for the door that led to the motor pool. As she passed, one of the junior operators looked up from his screen. Where's Mouse going with that gear? Harrison's voice was flat. Getting some air. Storm's making everyone nervous. The operator had already turned back to his screen, missing the small tattoo that peeked from beneath Sarah's rolled sleeve as she pushed through the door. A viper, coiled and ready to strike, with eyes that seemed to track the observer. The kind of ink that required special clearance from artists who didn't advertise and didn't ask questions. Outside, the Colombian night was thick with humidity and the promise of violence. Rain hammered down in sheets, turning the base into a maze of mud and shadows. Sarah moved through it like she'd been born to darkness, her movements economical and precise. She'd covered 200 meters before anyone thought to wonder why a quiet supply clerk knew exactly where the blind spots in the base's surveillance cameras were located. The jungle's edge beckoned, a wall of blackness beyond the perimeter lights. Sarah stopped at the fence line, assembling her rifle with movements so practiced they were meditation. Her steady fingers expertly assembled a specialized long-range optical targeting system. This was military-grade thermal imaging technology, originally developed for satellite surveillance but adapted for extreme jungle warfare conditions. Advanced atmospheric sensors could penetrate triple canopy vegetation and calculate bullet drift through humid air with surgical precision that civilian equipment could never achieve. Each component clicked into place with the satisfying precision of a Swiss timepiece. Delta 7, this is Eagle's Nest, the radio crackled in her earpiece. Still working those options. ETA unknown. Kane's response was more gunfire than words. We don't have unknown. They're moving to flank. Where's our goddamn help? Sarah finished assembly and pulled on the ghillie suit. The fabric was heavier than it looked, weighted down with local vegetation she'd been collecting and treating for months, telling anyone who asked that it was for a hobby project. Now that vegetation would help her vanish into the jungle like smoke in air. She switched her radio to the tactical frequency. Her voice, when it came, was different from the mouse everyone knew. Lower, steadier, with an edge that could cut glass. Delta Squad, new call sign on net. Stand by for fire support. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the gunfire seemed to pause as 6 special operators tried to process what they'd just heard. A woman's voice, calm as frozen lake water, promising fire support where none existed. Kane was first to recover, his response dripping contempt. Outstanding. What secretary found a radio? Lady, get off this goddamn frequency. This is a tactical channel for operators. Enemy sniper, northwest, 3rd branch up, approximately 40 meters from your position, Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying that same unsettling calm. Duck in 3, 2, 1. The crack of her rifle split the night like thunder. Through the radio, she heard the wet sound of impact, followed by breaking branches as a body crashed through the canopy. The cartel sniper landed 5 feet from Kane's position. Clean hole center forehead. The tactical channel went silent. Completely, absolutely silent. Sarah was already moving, gliding through the undergrowth like water through stones. The rain helped, masking sound and washing away tracks. She'd covered 50 meters in under a minute, finding an elevated position she'd scouted months ago during one of her walks that everyone assumed were just Mouse's quirks. Delta 7, she said, settling into position. Confirm visual on the body. Lieutenant Martinez's voice came through shaky with disbelief. Confirmed. Target down. Who is this? Who the hell is this? Someone who's going to get you home. Now listen carefully. You've got 15 hostiles approaching from the north, spread in standard flanking formation. Squad leader carrying a radio pack. 3rd from the left. On my command, suppress the canyon entrance. Kane found his voice again, but the contempt had been replaced by confusion. How can you see that? We've got night vision and can't see shit in this weather. Sarah ignored the question. She had work to do. Through her scope, the jungle revealed its secrets in gradients of heat. The cartel fighters were moving well. She'd give them that. Disciplined intervals, overlapping fields of fire, using terrain like men who'd grown up in these mountains. But discipline meant patterns, and patterns meant predictability. Execute, she said. Delta Squad opened suppressing fire, forcing the flanking element into cover. In that moment of transition, when movement stopped and positions were revealed, Sarah went to work. 6 shots in 8 seconds. 6 thermal signatures cooling in the rain. The surviving cartel fighters scrambled for cover. Their careful approach dissolved into chaos. Jesus Christ, someone whispered over the radio. Sarah thought it might have been Kane, but she was already changing position. The thing about being dead was that it freed you from certain constraints. Sarah Chen, supply clerk, had to follow rules, had to be nobody, had to accept the daily humiliations of invisibility. But the woman in the ghillie suit, the one whose file had been burned 3 years ago in a basement in Langley, had no such limitations. She was a ghost, and ghosts could do impossible things. New contact, southwest, she reported, eyed a scope. Count 30 plus. They're carrying RPGs. 30? Kane's voice cracked. We can't hold against 30. You won't have to. Hold position and keep your heads down. It's about to get loud. Through the thermal scope, Sarah studied the approaching force. These weren't jungle bandits with AK-47s. The way they moved, how they held their weapons, the hand signals she caught glimpses of. This was a trained unit. Somewhere in their ranks would be their leader, and somewhere behind him would be their best shooter. Find them, eliminate them, and the rest would scatter. There, a thermal signature hanging back, directing others forward, radio antenna protruding from his pack. The shot would be complicated. 1,400 meters through dense vegetation with crosswinds gusting up to 30 miles per hour. The kind of shot that existed in training manuals as theoretically possible but rarely attempted in actual combat. Sarah began her breathing sequence, the one that had been drilled into her so long ago it was autonomic. Inhale through nose, hold, exhale through mouth. Her heartbeat dropped. 45 beats per minute. 40. 38. At 35, the world narrowed to scope, target, and the space between. The rifle fired. 1,400 meters away, the cartel leader's head snapped back. His men scattered like roaches when the lights come on, discipline shattered by the impossible reality that someone somewhere in the darkness could reach out and touch them at will. Target eliminated, Sarah reported. They're reconsidering their life choices. This time it was definitely Kane who laughed. A sound caught between hysteria and awe. Who the fuck are you? Someone who needs you to move in 30 seconds. Can you make it to those rocks 20 meters northeast? The ones that look like a broken tooth? That's open ground. Not for long. Move. Sarah crawled back from her position, melting into the undergrowth. Now she had their attention. Every cartel fighter was looking at the ridgelines, wondering which shadow concealed death. Time to use that fear. She'd moved 200 meters when her earpiece crackled with a new voice. Older, calmer, with an accent that suggested European training. I know you're listening, shooter. This is Eduardo Cazador. Perhaps you've heard of me. Sarah's blood chilled. El Cazador, the hunter. Former Mexican Special Forces, trained at Fort Bragg before going mercenary. His file had crossed her desk once, back when she had a desk that mattered. 32 confirmed kills. Methodology suggested American training with Russian influences. If he was here, this wasn't random. Someone had paid serious money to eliminate Delta Squad. I've heard of many people, she replied, continuing to move. Most of them are dead. His laugh was rich, genuine. Ah, a woman. How delightful. Tell me, señorita, where did you learn to shoot? That was beautiful work with Miguel. Very clean. Finishing school. We had a very comprehensive curriculum. Indeed, I think perhaps we attended similar schools. Tell me, do they still teach walking technique at Benning? Or did you learn that somewhere more exclusive? Sarah's jaw tightened. He was fishing, but fishing in the right pond. She switched to Delta Squad's frequency. Move now, northeast to the rocks. Through her scope, she watched the special operators break cover, moving in pairs while others provided overwatch. Professional, smooth, trained, but exposed for 15 seconds of open ground. More than enough time for a good shooter. The muzzle flash came from the east, exactly where she'd expected. Sarah was already squeezing her trigger, sending her bullet on an intercept course. Not at the shooter, at his bullet. A one-in-a-million shot that existed more in theory than practice, deflecting one projectile with another. Her round caught his 2 feet from Martinez's head, both bullets spinning off into darkness. Madre de Dios, Cazador breathed over the radio. You're not just... That's impossible. Delta Squad, hold position, Sarah ordered, already moving again. The game had changed. Cazador wasn't just good. He was apex predator good. The kind of shooter who could make her work for it. Tell me your name, Cazador said. Professional courtesy. I am Eduardo Cazador, formerly of Grupo Aeromóvil de Fuerzas Especiales. And you? Sarah considered lying, but lies were for people who planned to survive their secrets. Once upon a time, they called me Viper. The silence that followed was profound. Even the jungle seemed to hold its breath. When Cazador spoke again, his voice had lost its playful edge. Number Viper died in Operation Serpent. Kandahar, 3 years ago. CIA confirmed it. CIA confirms a lot of things, doesn't make them true. Prove it. The real Viper had a signature. Show me. Sarah smiled grimly. He wanted a demonstration. Fine. Through her scope, she identified 5 targets spread across a 300-meter arc. In training, this was called the Viper Strike. 5 shots in 5 seconds, each from a different firing position, creating the illusion of multiple shooters. It required perfect muscle memory, absolute spatial awareness, and the kind of reflexes that came from genetics as much as training. She took a breath, held it, and became a weapon. The first shot came from her primary position, catching a cartel soldier trying to advance on Delta Squad's left flank. Before the brass hit the ground, Sarah was moving, sliding 8 meters through mud and undergrowth to position 2. Shot number 2 dropped a machine gunner setting up on the ridge. She rolled, came up in a crouch, acquired target 3, another flanker, and put him down before his partner realized what was happening. 10-meter sprint to position 4. Slide behind a fallen log just as return fire sparked where she'd been. Shot 4 took the partner center mass. Without pause, she pivoted 45 degrees, found the 5th target trying to call for backup on his radio, and permanently ended his transmission. 5 shots, 5 kills, 5 seconds. The jungle fell silent except for rain and the ragged breathing of frightened men. Mio Dios, Cazador's voice was reverent. It really is you, La Víbora herself. But how? I saw the reports after the operation. Your entire squad was killed in Kandahar. The building collapsed. Reports can be edited, Sarah cut him off, already shifting to her next position. Bodies can be misidentified. Sometimes people need to die so they can do what needs doing without congressional oversight interference. Through her scope, she caught movement. Cazador was repositioning too, using the conversation to mask his approach. CIA killed you to make you a better weapon, understanding crept into his voice. Black operations, wet work, the kinds of missions that don't exist. Something like that. Sarah found him in thermal, a ghost of heat moving through the canopy 300 meters from Delta Squad's position. He was good, using the trees like highways, but the rain had been falling long enough to cool the branches. His body heat stood out like a beacon. Professional to professional, Cazador said. I'm curious. How many operations? How many targets? Enough to know this ends one of 2 ways. You leave now, or you don't leave at all. His laugh was sad. You know I can't do that. They paid me $5 million American to ensure these commandos don't go home. My reputation. Your reputation won't matter if you're dead. True, but consider this. 50 more fighters are moving from the south. My best men. Even you can't stop them all. Sarah checked her tactical display. He wasn't bluffing. Heat signatures were multiplying at the Southern Valley entrance. A full platoon with heavy weapons, moving in disciplined formation. Delta Squad had 10 minutes, maybe less. During intense firefights, Sarah employed specialized combat pharmaceuticals, including military-grade nerve stabilizers and concentration enhancement compounds developed for special operations snipers in extended engagements. Prescription neurological enhancers designed for elite marksmen eliminated hand tremor, and improved visual acuity beyond normal human limitations under stress conditions. The bitter taste was familiar, grounding, a reminder of operations in places that didn't exist, against targets who were never there. Delta 7, she reported over radio. Large force approaching from the south. We need to thin them before they get in range. Copy, Kane responded. What's the plan? The plan is you keep your heads down and let me work. Cazador, ultima oportunidad. Professional courtesy. I appreciate the offer, Vibra, but we both know how this dance ends. Yes, Sarah said quietly. We do. She found him in her crosshairs, 400 meters, partially concealed behind a cluster of vines. Difficult shot, but not impossible. He was expecting her to fire. Would move the moment she pulled the trigger. So she didn't shoot. Not yet. Instead, she sent a round through a branch 6 inches above his head. Cazador reacted instantly, dropping and rolling left, directly into the path of her second shot. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. His rifle tumbled, clattering through branches to the jungle floor below. But he was still alive, still moving, reaching for his sidearm with his good hand. Sarah's third shot took the pistol from his grip along with 2 fingers. He fell back against the tree trunk, clutching his mangled hand. Wait! His voice came through radio, thick with pain. You had the kill shot. Why? Because you're a professional, not a cartel thug, and because dead men can't deliver messages. Tell whoever hired you that Delta squad is under my protection. Anyone who comes for them will find me waiting. They'll keep coming. They have unlimited resources. And I have unlimited patience. Your choice, Eduardo. Bleed out in these jungles or live to shoot another day. But not today. Not these men. A long pause. Then, I'll need a tourniquet for the arm. Northeast, 20 meters from your position. There's a med cache hidden under rocks that look like a skull. I put it there 8 months ago. You've been here that long. I'm everywhere that long. Goodbye, Eduardo. Don't make me kill you twice. She cut the connection and turned her attention to the approaching force. 50 men, heavily armed, confident in their numerical superiority. They'd spread into classic assault formation. 2 prongs to pin Delta Squad, while a third flanked for the killing blow. Textbook tactics that would work against most opponents. Sarah wasn't most opponents. She started with their communications, sending precise shots through every visible radio antenna. Without coordination, 50 men became 5 groups of 10, each assuming the others were still in contact. Then she went after the heavy weapons, RPG carriers first, then machine gun teams. Each shot placed to wound rather than kill. Wounded men screamed. Screaming men destroyed morale. Jesus Christ, Kane whispered over radio. She's tearing them apart. Sir, Martinez's voice was odd. Shot patterns. I've seen this before. Operation Serpent, classified footage. This can't be. Kane cut him off. She's dead. The whole squad died in Kandahar. Dead people make the best ghosts, Captain. Sarah's voice was steady despite the fatigue creeping into her muscles. 3 years of playing mouse had made her soft. The concentration enhancers could only do so much. Your extraction window is opening. North-northeast, following the canyon. Move now while they're in disarray. Who are you? Kane demanded. Really? Who the hell are you? Sarah repositioned again, muscles remembering trails her mind had mapped months ago. The cartel fighters were starting to panic now, firing blind into the jungle. Their muzzle flashes gave away positions, made them easy targets. 3 years ago, CIA needed someone who could operate in places American soldiers couldn't go. Someone who could eliminate threats without leaving fingerprints. They found 12 of us, all women, all with unique skill sets. They called us Viper Squad. Another position change, another perfectly placed shot. The remaining cartel fighters were in full retreat now, dragging wounded comrades, abandoning weapons and equipment. Sarah let them go. The message would spread. These mountains were protected by something that killed from darkness. Fear was more effective than bullets. Viper, Kane said slowly, like he was tasting the word. Holy shit, you really are her. The ghost sniper. We thought those were just stories. Stories are all that's left of us, Captain. Now move. Your transport will be here in 5 minutes. How do you... The distant thrum of rotors answered his question. Somehow, despite the weather, despite the stand-down orders, helicopters were flying. Sarah smiled grimly. Colonel Harrison was calling in favors. Good man. She watched through her scope as Delta Squad moved out, professional even in retreat. They'd make it. Mission complete. Time for her to fade back into the shadows. Where are you, Viper? The voice came from directly behind her. Sarah froze, calculating angles and distances. 3 meters, elevated position, no cover between them. She'd been so focused on the valley she'd missed the approach. Hands where I can see them, rifle on the ground. Slowly she complied, setting down her rifle and raising her hands. In her peripheral vision she caught black tactical gear, suppressors, the kind of equipment that didn't appear in standard Army inventories. CIA Security Division, the ones who cleaned up messes and solved personnel problems that couldn't go through normal channels. The leader was young, under 30, with the kind of face that had never known real hardship. Ma'am, we're here to bring you in. Langley has questions about your activities. I'm sure they do. Sarah kept her voice calm, hands visible. Let me guess. Someone noticed the ammunition discrepancies. Or was it the medical supplies I requisitioned? You've been operating without authorization for 3 years. Tonight it ends. Ends? Sarah smiled. Tell me, Agent, what's your name? That's not relevant. Thompson, she said, reading his micro-expressions. First name? David. Number Daniel. Daniel Thompson. Recruited from Penn State. Fast-tracked because your cyber skills compensated for mediocre fieldwork. This is your first hot extraction, isn't it? Thompson's grip on his weapon tightened. How? Because I wrote your psychological evaluation when I had a desk at Langley, before I became inconvenient. Tell me, Daniel, do you know why they really sent you for me? You're a rogue asset, a security threat. I'm a reminder, Sarah corrected, of operations gone wrong, of agents left behind, of promises broken. They want me gone because every day I exist is another day someone might ask uncomfortable questions about Operation Serpent. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder. Not just extraction birds, Sarah could distinguish at least 2 other sets of rotors. Heavy ones. Colonel Harrison wasn't just calling in favors, he was mobilizing a small army. Here's what's going to happen, Sarah said. You're going to report that you found no trace of the rogue asset, that whoever was operating in this area must have moved on. You'll do this because the alternative is explaining to your superiors how you lost a 3-man team to a single operator who's supposedly been out of the game for 3 years. You're threatening us. I'm offering you a chance to walk away. Same offer I gave Cazador. Professional courtesy. Lights blazed through the canopy as the first helicopter passed over their position. The door gunner held an M240 trained on the clearing. A voice crackled through loudspeakers. CIA security team, this is Colonel Harrison, United States Army. You are in violation of operational security protocols. Stand down immediately. Thompson looked at the circling aircraft, then back at Sarah. This won't end here. They'll keep sending teams. Let them come. I'll be waiting. She stepped backward, dissolving into shadows. Oh, and Daniel? Check your sidearm. Thompson's hand flew to his holster, finding it empty. His pistol lay disassembled at his feet, broken down to components in the seconds he'd been distracted by the helicopter. His partners spun with weapons raised, but Sarah was already gone. Only her voice remained, drifting from the darkness. Tell Langley that Viper is dead. She died in Kandahar with her sisters. What's left is just a ghost, and you can't kill what's already dead. 6 months later, Sarah Chen sat in her small office at Forward Operating Base Eagle's Nest, typing requisition orders and filing inventory reports. Her desk was neat, organized, forgettable. The only decoration was a small challenge coin, its surface polished from handling. A trident on one side, a viper on the other. Outside, she could hear Delta Squad preparing for another mission. Kane had specifically requested this forward base for his staging area, claiming it had the best logistical support in theater. The real reason went unspoken but understood. They wanted their guardian angel nearby. A knock at the door interrupted her typing. "Come in." Colonel Harrison entered, closing the door behind him. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, the weight of secrets adding lines to his face. "Any problems with Langley?" Sarah asked without looking up from her screen. "Nothing I couldn't handle." Helps that Delta Squad's after-action report was very specific about the assistance they received. Hard to make someone disappear when 6 special operators are willing to testify to their existence. They're good people. They are. Harrison placed a folder on her desk, which is why I thought you should see this. Sarah opened the folder, finding satellite photographs of a compound in Venezuela. Armed guards, fortified positions, and at the center, a building that made her blood run cold. She'd seen its twin in Kandahar just before it collapsed on her team. "Same architect," Harrison said quietly. "Same design. We think it's the same organization." "The one that killed my sisters," Sarah's voice was flat. "When?" 2 weeks. Delta Force Primary, but they've requested surveillance support. Specifically, they requested you. Sarah stared at the images. 3 years of being nobody, accepting the fiction of her death, letting the world forget Viper had ever existed. 3 years of safety bought with silence. But safety had never been the point. She reached into her drawer, the same locked drawer that had started everything 6 months ago. Inside, next to the rifle case, lay 11 photographs. 11 women who had trusted her to keep them alive. 11 ghosts who deserved justice. "Tell Delta I'll be there," she said. "But I go in black. No records, no oversight, no acknowledgement." An alarm klaxon cut through her words. The base intercom system crackled to life. All units, we have troops in contact. Grid coordinate 779, immediate assistance requested." Sarah was already moving, muscle memory taking over. She grabbed the rifle case and headed for the door, stopping only to look back at Harrison. 12 hours, she said. "Have Delta Force ready in 12 hours. "Where are you going?" Sarah smiled, and for a moment, Harrison saw not the quiet logistics clerk, but the predator she'd always been. "Someone needs help. That's what ghosts do, Colonel. We answer when no one else can." She vanished into the Colombian night, leaving Harrison alone with photographs of 11 dead women and satellite images of a building that might hold answers. Outside, the jungle waited, dark and full of secrets. Some legends never die. They just wait for the next call from the darkness, the next impossible shot, the next chance to balance the scales. And in the shadows between life and death, between fiction and truth, Viper endured. After all, someone had to watch over the living, especially when the living didn't know they were being watched. The storm was returning. Lightning illuminated the mountains in stark relief. Somewhere out there, soldiers were fighting for their lives, praying for a miracle they didn't know was already moving through the darkness toward them. Sarah Chen, mouse, nobody, forgotten clerk, ceased to exist the moment she stepped into the jungle. What emerged on the other side was something altogether different. Something that had waited 3 years for a reason to exist again. In the distance, automatic weapons fire echoed through the valley like thunder rolling between peaks. Another battle, another crisis, another chance to prove that sometimes the best protection comes from shadows no one thinks to check. Muzzle flashes painted the low-hanging clouds in brief strokes of orange and red. Another desperate fight unfolding in the endless war. Sarah paused at the jungle's edge, rain streaming down her painted face, the weight of the rifle familiar as an old friend on her shoulder. "Some ghosts," she whispered to the darkness that had become her home, her voice barely audible over the storm, "refuse to stay buried." The jungle swallowed her whole, vegetation closing behind her like a curtain falling on a stage. And the legend lived on.